Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him, we glorify Him, and we send peace and salutations upon our last and final messenger, Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. My respected audience, I would like to welcome you all to a brand new session this week. Inshallah, this week we have a very special guest with us, Brother Abdul Rahim from Kolkata in West Bengal in India. And he will be speaking about how we can start a new venture of ours. We will come to the topic, but before we come to the topic, we have an important introduction to make. As you all know, we started off with the BBA webinar approximately 6 weeks back, and we have been covering on different issues, on different topics pertaining to the current environment that we are living in. Globally, the COVID pandemic has changed the entire way the business model works. People are changing their businesses. There are people who are being forced because of the job losses which are taking place. Billions of jobs have been lost. Because of that, people are being forced to change their way they maintain their lifestyle, the kind of work that they need to do to sustain themselves. Everyone is now trying to work on being a little more creative to earn more money. And may Allah make things easy for all of us. In today's session, we have with us Brother Abdul Rahim, who shall be speaking about a very important topic, a question which has been coming to us in almost every webinar. What is the best business I can do in this period of pandemic? Or how can I start a business of my own? And it's a concern which is a very valid concern. And we hope, inshallah, Brother Abdul Rahim will be able to provide us some idea, some guidance, some solution, bi-iznillahi ta'ala. Before I introduce Brother Abdul Rahim, I would like to remind you that these programs, these webinars are brought to you by the Department of Business Administration. And each one of you who are listening to this session, I would urge you to visit the IOU website, the International Open University's website, and find out about all the programs that we have. We have different categories of program. We have courses on Islamic studies, courses on education, psychology, Islamic banking and economics, psychology, and above all, the business administration course, which is inshallah going to be something correlated to business administration is how do you start your business, which Brother Abdul Rahim will be shedding light on. Before I hand over the session to Brother Abdul Rahim, let me give a quick introduction about Brother Rahim, the guest of today. Abdul Rahim is an Indian chartered accountant and an MBA from a prestigious XLRI Jamshedpur. He is an international development consultant who has worked with international agencies such as the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the United Nations Development Program, and the Department for International Development. He has been part of entrepreneurial journey of the IPE Global for the last 2 decades, helping it to become one of the largest development consultancy firm in the South Asia. And he currently is the Chief Knowledge Officer. Brother Abdul Rahim has also set up his own farming venture. And that's something really exciting. And we would hope Brother Abdul Rahim will be able to shed some light about what farming venture is all about. In Bihar, in India, in order to maximize productivity and profit for the farmers in a relatively underdeveloped but highly agrarian state. During the COVID, he is working on his latest venture in online education and training. It's called the Academy for Life and Futuristic Sciences, ALIFS, where he is also the co-founder. In addition to all of this, And this is really when I met Brother Abdul Rahim, is when the youth-based volunteer NGO model which he runs, which is called the Siri Sakti Foundation, TSSF, which is, mashallah, quite popular in the state of Bengal. And with that, I would like Brother Abdul Rahim to take over the presentation, make his initial presentation. And I would request all of those who are listening to the session live, if you have any question, please start posting your queries in the chat box, and we will take up the questions as soon as he has made his initial remarks. Brother Abdul Rahim, I hand over the stage to you. Over to you. Barakallahu feek.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah, Brother Mansoor. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and welcome to everyone here for this set presentation on how to start a new venture. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. I think today's topic is so interesting that I thought I requested Brother Mansoor Danish to allow me to start with a short presentation on the subject, so that we can start appreciating the topic itself a little differently. A lot of us have got some preconceived ideas about ventures, about business, and also about jobs. We think we are cut out for one type of them, not the other. Perhaps we've got myths in our mind about how the other type of work actually operates. So I thought I'll give a little bit of background, breaking some of the myths that are behind the entrepreneurial or the new venture circle. So let me quickly go through this short presentation where we will just discuss some of the issues of how and why we can be more entrepreneurial in nature, how we can plan, set up, operate, and profit from new ventures, especially in the current pandemic situation. I just want to take a look back and ask ourselves, how have we as humans been? Have we been historically, have we been employment-oriented people, or have we been enterprise-oriented people? And the answer is very obvious. In fact, as Mohammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner and microfinance pioneer from nearby Bangladesh, says, all human beings are entrepreneurs. When we were in caves, we were self-employed. We found our own food, we fed ourselves. And that's been the cradle of history, the cradle of civilization. But then as we became more and more structured, we suppressed it. And we became labor because they stamped us, you are labor. And we forgot that we are entrepreneurs. For those of you who are not aware, Mohammad Yunus started the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, where all he did was provide microfinance, small amounts to especially women entrepreneurs in the rural areas. And they had a fantastic response. Not only were they able to start small ventures, but the repayment rate was as high as 96%. And as a result of it, they actually helped a lot of people move out of poverty. The point is that we are all inherently entrepreneurial. All of us need and have to and want to take up something new on our own. But we've been conditioned, we've been stamped, we've been made to behave like employees. Before I move ahead, I also want to mention that there is some statistic which says that about 97% people in this world are actually working for the 3% who are entrepreneurs. Now, maybe the percentage is not an accurate reflection, and perhaps there's no data on this rightly, but it's a fact that the majority of people in this world are looking for a job under that small group of people who actually claim to be the entrepreneurial class. We are here to break some myths, and we are here to think about how we can really change this psyche, change this thinking, and the change happens here first. Let's go ahead and understand a little bit about how and why we can start new ventures. But before we move ahead, let's understand that we are right now talking in a context where COVID has taken the whole world by storm. Just last week, we had the data for India, and in the first quarter of this year, compared to last year, we've had a 23% drop in GDP growth. If you look at the data from the IMF, which is right now on your screen, it shows that across the world, there's going to be negative growth. The global economy is projected, and this data is for June. We'll get the latest data in September again. But they say that there's going to be a 5%, close to 5% negative growth in global economy, with advanced economies having a higher drop up to 8%, and emerging economies up to -3%. So obviously, it's a bad time to start a business, right? No, absolutely wrong. This is the right time to start a business. As I said, there are some myths, and we need to break those myths. Let me give you a few examples from history. Some companies which were actually set up during testing times and actually have done tremendously well over the years. The first company I want to talk about is General Electric. It was set up in 1892 before a 3-year mini recession, where actually many people, many companies went out of job, many people were put out of job, and yet General Electric not only survived, but thrived and still continues to do even today. The next company, IBM, set up around 1911. Economic shocks in the oil sector, in the stock market sector in the US, but nevertheless, IBM, being a new technology field, continued and grew and has still continued to survive and bloom. Disney, which came in around the 30s. And at that time, it was a depression, the Great Depression that we know about. And even at that time, Disney knew something, that even in this depression, in this position where people don't know what to do, anyone who can put a smile on their face will be able to earn money. And lo, within those 3 or 4 years after the depression, they were able to actually recover their costs and become highly profitable and continue to grow even today. HP, 1939, again, tough times in the US at that time, they grew well. Hyatt in 1957. These are all times around a year or two of recession or a drop or an uncertainty period in which all these companies have started. And finally, Microsoft in 1975. So if these at least 6 representative companies can actually do so well, having started in a recession or in a slowdown or in a place where the positive energy was missing, what's wrong with now? In fact, you know something? Hyatt, for that matter, when it picked up all its properties or some of its properties at that time, was able to do so at low prices because of the general emotion which was low at that time. Cut to 2020. Isn't it the same time right now where actually sentiments are running low? Where today, if you need the best people, they're being laid off from the best companies and are ready to work with you at maybe half the price. Is it not the best time to look at setting up a new company, which will feature in this slide some years down the line? So I think breaking the first myth that this is a bad time to start a business, I think this is one of the best times to start a business. But the real question is different. The real question is, are you ready for it? Are you made out for it? You remember these rides where you as a child have to stand up and show your height? If you're tall enough, which means you're old enough, then you're allowed to go on the roller coaster. Otherwise, they say you're too young, you have to go. So the question really is not whether there is a potential outside, whether there is a market outside, whether there are possibilities which are outside. The question really is, the roller coaster is there. The question is, are you sizing up to it? Are you ready for it? And today we'll be talking about some of those things, how we can start making the change within us to be able to take up these opportunities. I think this slide actually explains a lot of things. We consider business or taking up a new venture as a function of our ability. I'm educated, I'm trained, I can do these things, therefore I should be able to take up this venture, right? Absolutely wrong. In order to do a business, in order to start a new venture, in order to go on your own, you need all these 3 things. Your ability is but 1/3 of the requirement. Your aptitude, your intelligence, your education, your training, your experience, all these count only one of those 3 components that you can see on your screen right now. Your personality is going to count a lot more than put in a job. Why is that? Because as an entrepreneur, as a new venture, as a startup, you are an employer, and your personality has to be such that can keep the team together. In any other job, you may be a small part of a team. You may be heading a small team, and only your influence is around that. But as a founder, as a startup venture, you are going to define the culture of that organization. And hence, people who come to you will look at your personality. So your personality plays a big role over here. But perhaps more than both these is the third state, which is the psychological state. What is your psychological state? Are you ready to take this up? Well, it's a fact, and many of you would be knowing this, that every day new businesses are set up. And most new businesses, especially small new businesses, fail. Couple of years, maybe 5 years at most. Many of those companies which have been set up with those fantastic dreams by those grand entrepreneurs actually close down. Why is that? Is it because of ability? Is it because of personality? Perhaps is it because of the psychological state? What is the self-image that they had? What were the societal norms? What was the fear of failure? What was the level of patience that they had? There are many people whom we know who actually sold out a business at a very low cost because they did not get the result they were looking at. But the person who took it over immediately benefited from it and was able to take it to heights that they never thought possible. Do we have that patience to continue? What is the motivation we have to continue? What is the self-efficacy we have to continue? So I think these three components are what are needed in order to make a business or a new venture successful. We'll cover some of these, and especially the psychological state. And since I think most of us are from a Muslim background, a Muslim religion, Islam, I think we need to also understand and see it from that perspective, because that also dictates our psychological state. Let me quickly go a little bit to the background. In Islam, it is considered, at least publicly, people do think it's not proper to have a lot of economic wealth or prosperity. In fact, frugality is considered a virtue, and having a lot of wealth is looked down upon. Well, we start with one of the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, which he often quoted, Allahumma kfini bi halalika and haramika. Allah, I ask you for that which is lawful for me and to prevent me from that which is unlawful. Waghnini bi fadlika amman siwak, and give me by your blessings and keep me away from asking anybody else for it, so that I'm not dependent on anyone else for it. If you ask me, this is the philosophy of Islam as far as the economic wealth is concerned. The wealth must be halal. It should be preventing in any way from anything which is unlawful, and we should be dependent on the blessing of Allah Ta'ala for it, and dependent on no one else for that which we expect Him as the Razaq to give us. And also, if you look at history, you will find that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself was a merchant. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself was a merchant, and he has had numerous ahadiths on the virtues of a good businessman. He has himself shown by character, shown by example, encouraged people to take up ventures, to take up business. We all know about the hadith in Tirmidhi, where he asked this person who came and asked him for some money to get what he had from his house. And he auctioned that among the people for 2 coins, one of which he said, go and get an axe. And the other one, he said, buy provisions for your home. He himself fitted the axe and gave him and said, go to the woods, cut wood, sell it to the market, and don't come back until you have made a profit from it. And he came back, and mashallah, he was on his feet economically. So business and earning income are not, so to say, abhorred or unliked by Islam. The Sahabas, radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'een, many of them were wealthy businessmen. Of course, they gave up their lot of money for the sake of Islam. Of course, starting with Hazrat Usman ibn Affan, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And of course, Abdul Rahman bin Auf, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and other Sahabas who had a lot of wealth. But the most important thing was their wealth was used for the right cause. The wealth was not used for self-aggrandizement. The wealth was not used for trying to say, I'm so great, I've earned so much, but for a good cause. We also know that in Islam, there is a strong provision for charity and zakah. In fact, the whole philosophy of Islam is that Allah Ta'ala has given you the wealth and you need to give it away in His way to others. And that, therefore, if we look at ourselves as only a conduit, as a means, then obviously the ownership of wealth transforms into a stewardship of wealth. And that is the philosophy behind Islam in terms of economic growth. Also, if you look at history, Islam has spread across the world through traders, through people who went doing business along trading routes, including in India. The first Islamic, shall we say, people who came and accepted Islam were along the routes in Kerala, in Gujarat. These were the people who actually saw Muslims who came there to trade and were so impressed by the religion that they adopted the religion. So again, business and Islam are not contradictory. And another thing which a lot of people say, money and dunya is discouraged in Islam. Well, what is really discouraged is the love of money, the love of dunya. We are all existing in this earth, and we know that we have to work in this world and use this world as a mazri'atul akhirah, as a way to prepare ourselves for the akhirah. So the love of money or dunya is discouraged, not in itself money or dunya. And I think mal is, of course, the Arabic word for mal. I think I just thought, there's another word called a'mal, right? Which are the good deeds we do. And the mal is the wealth we have. The question is, can we convert mal to a'mal? Can we bring that virtue to the wealth, which is actually seen as maybe too worldly to be really noble? Well, I think there are three things if we do. We can convert mal to amal. All this with the condition that we don't have the love of mal in our hearts. Well, the first is, if we can take care of the why we want, why are we earning this wealth? What is our niyyah behind it? Is it so that people call me a great businessman, so that I become the richest person in this world? Or is it so that I can earn money to be able to give employment to people? Is it because I want to create a new product that will ease the lives of people, bring out a new medicine that will cure people, say for COVID or anything of that sort? The niyyah. The second is how we earn it. How we earn it. What are the means? Is it halal? Is it haram? Is it mutashabihah? Is it something we doubt? So what is it? If it's pure, if it's halal, then we shall actually be doing a good deed by doing that, because in earning this money, we are actually helping people to get their jobs. And finally, the third thing is where we spend this money. Where we spend this money. We talked about zakat and charity. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu anfiqu mimma razaqnakum. Spend from what I have given you. If you have that intention, if you end it for the community, if you spend it for doing good deeds which shall benefit you in your akhirah, then alhamdulillah, the mal will itself become more amal for you. As you earn money, of course, again, the caveat, without having the love for it in your heart, but only using yourself as a steward and as a conduit for it, your mal may transform to more amal. Let me quickly go through some of the final slides and then we'll come to the questions. Who is this person? I mean, we all know the first flying machine, the first airplane was made by the Wright brothers in 1903. But there is this person, an eminent person from Islamic history, who actually tried the first flight by a human being with these artificial wings put on him, right? And when was this? Can you imagine? Which year was this? It was about 1,000 years before the Wright brothers. 1,000 years. His name was Abbas ibn Firnas. And he attempted to fly 1,000 years before the Wright brothers. Why am I telling you this? Because I'm saying that the Muslim people, the Muslim community has been and should be adventurous, risk-taking, and at the front end of cutting-edge inventions, technology, and change. Perhaps we've lost these things, and those are part of the psychological state we've lost. But if you ask me, this community has to be entrepreneurial by nature. So this is just an example of Abbas ibn Farnas. Another myth a lot of people have, well, if I'm not so educated, what do I do? How can I survive? What can I do? This is a little bit of some eminent people in today's economic world who actually did very well without actually completing school in a full way. For example, we start with Michael Dell, Steve Jobs, Apple, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, Bill Gates, who left his college at 20, Twitter co-founder Evan Williams, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook founder, Larry Ellison, Oracle founder, the WhatsApp founder, the Uber founder, as well as Whole Foods, and so many other people, including, if you look at it in India, the Dhirubhai Ambani, the biggest, his son is now the richest man in India. He's also been, his father was a dropout. His father didn't study, not a dropout. In fact, he didn't even study. So I think this is itself a myth in our mind that unless I am educated in a certain way, I cannot start a new venture. This itself is also not a constraint as far as we are about to start. I think the most important thing is when you want to start a new venture, it's about being passionate about what I want to do. What do I want to do and why do I want to do it? Why I want to do it? What is the purpose behind it? This is the most important thing, which keeps you going even when things are not going great. So why do I want to do it? And how I do it? What is my quality? What is my excellence? What is the way that I do it that people will really love? And most importantly, which I said right at the beginning, why do I do it? Whom do I do it for? If our intention is, of course, to earn halal income for our family, to be able to live comfortably, that itself is ibadah. If our intention is that I will take a part of it and give it away as charity, I will help my community get employment, that itself is ibadah. So being passionate about it and keeping all these things in mind will help us have that necessary psychological state, having the courage to actually move into that next phase of starting up our venture. Now, how do I start up my venture? Of course, there are a lot of legal formalities which differ from country to country. In today's world, there are also a lot of, I would say, a lot of business strategies and methods that we need to follow. We will, of course, have to understand these in much more greater detail. But today, I just want to touch upon this whole thing about the correct mindset needed before we start on a new venture. So I want to ask all of us, what's your why? Anybody who started his own or her own business and says that, well, I'm doing my business, but I'm not really making the kind of results I'm looking for, so I'm thinking whether I should shut down. Ask this to yourself again. What was my why when I started it? And if you can get this why, all the other things will fade in comparison and you'll continue with it and you will make a success of it, inshallah ta'ala, bi'iznillah ta'ala. So I think I just want to give you final slides, some strategies if you want to start new ventures, some ideas of how you can think of new ventures. Now, obviously, there's no one size fits all or one solution for every situation, but there are about 4 strategies you can look. The first is a market penetration strategy. Some existing product is there. I will now enhance that product's penetration into the market. Now, there's a very low risk in this because that product is established. There's a market for it. How can I do this? I can do this by enhancing customer service, by enhancing quality, and by enhancing marketing. Say, for instance, there is a certain brand of a mobile that's already quite popular. I want to set up and enhance that product's customer quality, the customer service quality, and the marketing and the offers that I'm going to give with it. Hopefully, I will be able to get a larger audience come to me. So this is called the market penetration strategy, through which with a low risk, I can actually start a new venture, and with an established product and a market, just differentiating it on these 3 grounds, I can make my own venture. The second is product development strategy. This has got a reasonable risk, about 30% risk, but obviously we are very risk-taking people, so we should take risks. But product development means a new product for existing customers. People who are used to doing things in a certain way, I'm going to give a product which is slightly better, but their need is already there. New product development and latent customer needs. A very good example of this is Google itself. A lot of us actually think of Google as the prime mover in search. It was not. A lot of other people came before it, but Google eventually gave this new product to existing customers of search engines. Facebook itself. How many of you remember Orkut? Orkut was a precursor to Facebook, but Orkut died out and Facebook continued. So new products for existing customers is a product development strategy. The third strategy is market development, where you have a higher risk, where you look at existing products for new markets. You go to newer areas, newer geographies, newer types of customers, and you try and enhance the market pie itself so that newer people can take it. And finally, which is the most risky option, is of creating a new product category, creating a new product to a new customer. Let's look at Apple iPhone, right? It's created a new product, it created a new customer for it, and it's maintained that customer sector. So I think these are kind of four broad strategies we can use. But within this, what exactly will work and how we need to take forward, I'll hope to take those things when we take the questions in this session. So thank you so much for that. I'll hand it back to Mansoor Bhai, and as we take it on from here.
Okay. We will just, yeah. Okay. Barakallahu Feek, Brother Abdul Rahim, for your initial presentation, mashallah. A lot of important points that Brother Abdul Rahim has mentioned. And I was also making my own notes here. So you mentioned about this being one of the best time to start a business. So any one of you who felt that COVID is a time when we don't know what to do, we just need to sit, wait and watch, he has in fact given us another perspective altogether. He says this is one of the best time to start your business. He also went on to speak about, well, the three important things which are needed to start a business: ability, personality, and a psychological state. So any one of you who thought that it is only about ability, then ability only is 1/3. If you think you have the personality, that also is just 1/3. It is the psychological state which completes you to be prepared to move on. Some other important points which is mentioned, and mashallah, there were a lot of good points that you mentioned. You mentioned about the philosophy of Islam on wealth in the form of the dua that you quoted of the Prophet ﷺ, and mentioning about seeking more of halal, saving ourselves from haram, and putting our complete dependency on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That should be our ultimate goal and objective. The wealth, and this is something I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions. I can already see a question which has come to me. The wealth should not be used for self-advertisement, but rather it should be used for a good cause. And Allah has given you the wealth. This is another important, I just was noting some important points, that statements that you were saying. We often tend to feel that the money that we have, the wealth that we have, is the doing of our own hands, our own mindset, it's our knowledge. But it's very important to remind ourselves that what we have with us has come to us completely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have these people who we call the ones with the blue collar jobs. They work really hard. And at the end of all of this, they probably take 1/10 of what a white collared man gets sitting comfortably in an air conditioned environment. So this is completely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Important points about mal and amal. How do you link between the two? How do you make virtue become part of your wealth? That's so important. And the niyah, the intention, everything depends upon the intention eventually, isn't it? So a lot of important things, and the most important takeaway was being passionate. If you want to start your business, what you want to do, why you want to do it, how do you want to do it, and whom do you want to do it for. So these were some of the key takeaways that Brother Abdul Rahim has shared with us. I'll request others to keep sharing your questions. Some of you have shared your questions with me directly on WhatsApp. The chat box is open. We already have a question, so I'm going to take the question from the chat box. The questioner wants to know, what's the best affordable platform to use in order to host and bring alive our new business in order to reach a targeted audience? So the questioner wants to know about a platform which can be used in order to advertise their products. Do you suggest Facebook and social media page? Will that be sufficient? Or do we need to have maybe our own portal, etc., etc.? Barakallahu feek.
Okay, thank you so much. That's an interesting question. I think one of the major changes due to the pandemic, which we have seen, is a huge surge in web usage, internet usage, and a lot of people moving online. I remember I wanted to upgrade my broadband connection, and the person said, sorry, we've run out of we've run out of the fittings needed for that, because there's been such a huge demand for it over the last few months. So this is going to be the future. We are moving, and in fact, it's a forced way, but all of us have moved to this. So I see technology becoming the number one game changer in all overall, in terms of in terms of enterprise. And in that context, digital marketing becomes the key differentiator. Now, that's got a positive side to it as well. If it was any other mode of advertisement, then a lot of people who were starting up new ventures perhaps couldn't afford it. It was really prohibitive, and a lot of people couldn't match up to the large corporations as far as the spending on advertisement were concerned. But by using digital media, digital marketing, a lot of people can compete with the biggest brands. So we all move to a more level field. Yes, I suggest use social media, use Facebook, use all the means that are available. Try and see how each of them work out to you. And based on that, you will be able to move to a certain level where you can make your next level, if it's not a product which sells exclusively on an online platform. But do start with this, because the level of customization that's possible will give you much more results and impact than just a general marketing will do.
Okay, Barakallahu Feek. We'll take one more question. Now, when you mentioned about the statement where wealth should not be used for self-advertisement, rather it should be used for a good cause. This is a very tricky situation, because now we live at a time when everywhere we see personal branding, which is a very important topic. And by the way, I'm also reading a book on personal branding. So should I actually get away with this book? This is not needed anymore. What is your take on it? Because when you say that it should not be used for self-advertisement, would you like to qualify that statement?
Okay, I think the word I used was self-aggrandizement, which is sort of making ourselves the recipient of the credit for that wealth that I've created. So I think it was more of trying to, as you said, take credit for that, or feeling proud of that, or feeling that I've achieved something because I've earned this wealth. Because as you said, and I also reiterated, all this is only from Allah, and that humility is so important when we earn the wealth, because that will just negate whatever we have done otherwise. And so therefore, what I meant was self-aggrandizement, thinking highly about ourselves because of our ability or the fact that we have earned wealth. Personal branding is unfortunately a reality. But today in a venture situation, we are actually talking about product branding. We're talking about enterprise branding. And these are realities. And I'm sure that our people need to learn these things. Otherwise, we end up having a bad brand. Like made in China right now is not a good brand, at least in most parts of the world, because that's got a negative connotation to it right now. But we have to make ourselves as a positive brand, whatever product or enterprise we are in. So branding, yes. Aggrandizement, no.
Okay. Here's some more questions which have come our way. We'll first take the question on the kind of business one should start. So should I do what everyone else is doing, or should I start thinking differently? So you did mention about market penetration and finding out about products, etc. But the basic question still remains unanswered. What kind of product should I start working on? So if I'm a person who's sitting at home right now listening to you and I don't know where to start from, what advice do you have for me?
Okay. So as I said, there's no one formula or one solution that will suit everyone. You've got to look at it in your own context. But what I want to tell you is a few tips on this. There are some things that you definitely would be more comfortable in, some things that you would really like to do. What are your skills? Your first level of analysis is not the market. The first level of analysis is you. What is it that I am more comfortable in doing? Am I am I a person who's very good in organization? Am I a person who's very good in logistics? Am I a person who's good in marketing? And based on these, what kind of organization can I create around that? There are several models that are available, but all I want to say is that that model will depend on you and your organization's capability. One of the simple models that have been there around for several years is white labeling, which means I buy some products from a manufacturing country, for example, China, and I sell it branded in my name through my website. Now, that has been a standard practice across the world, including some of the big brands who actually bought those stuff from China, branded it as themselves, and sold that at a premium. Now, is that the kind of business that you can or would like to do? Or is it something that you as a professional have some quality in you that you would like to offer? Imagine, I mean, as you said, somebody may be sitting at home right now and looking at this. Now, sitting at home has become the new normal, as they say, right? What is it that you can do from home, which earlier you couldn't do? Teaching, for instance. It's a whole new world that's opened up. I want us to go beyond our thinking about what can I sell. I want us to start thinking of what new things can I do in the new context of COVID. I mean, if you ask me, there's a huge market potential to create a low cost, simple machine allowing children to study at home, which is not a laptop nor a mobile. Every student today has got to study at home, and they are using either a laptop, which is their parents, or a mobile, which is again from their parents or so, and they are facing problems because they are having access to the entire internet. But if somebody was to create a child safe, simple to use apparatus which has got inbuilt some of these conference softwares that are used, it could have a market. So the point is, there's no easy solution for it. You've got to really think. And you know, one of the ways to think of it is just take a walk. I know it's difficult these days, but take a walk and see what are the pains people are facing. What is it that you think is a problem, and find a solution to it. Just doing the normal stuff doesn't excite anybody, but there'll be no big why. But ask yourself, do you know how Uber was built? Uber is a very simple solution now that you think of it. People had mobiles which had their GPS on it, and drivers of taxis had mobiles which had their GPS on it. All it needed was somebody to connect it. But where did the idea come? When its founder was standing on the curb for an hour waiting for a taxi but couldn't get a taxi to stop. He said, why don't I create something that will link both these mobiles and allow me to ask that person to come here? He could be sitting on the other road and not knowing I'm needed here. So pain is the first point to identify where can I do it. Pain relieving is the best way to build the new business venture which can solve. If you can solve your pain for a lot of people, you actually got a fantastic business model up.
Okay, mashallah. So if you do step out for a walk, the guidelines needs to be maintained. Please maintain social distance. Make sure you put on your mask. And then, of course, you can move out and start thinking of a good idea. And in fact, because of the COVID norms that we are living in, and I think the example that you gave of a student-friendly apparatus which can actually help them without damaging them, the screen time, etc., and all the filters which are needed, the blue screen filter, etc., which could not be very expensive and can also benefit them, is an amazing thing. And I'm sure there must be some brains which have already probably started working on it, considering we don't know how long this pandemic will last. Well, a lot of questions coming in. This one is on the money part. So you've touched upon everything. We've spoken about earning money through business, but before we get into business, we need to put in money to start a business. Where will that money come from? Considering the fact that in the Muslim world today, we don't find a lot of easy steps of borrowing. The borrowing is an issue. You don't have a lot of Islamic banks and finance in many of the countries. And this question comes from a country where there is no setup. So how do you expect people to start a business? Gone are the days where an Abdul Rahman ibn Auf could come to Medina, and because of the bond of brotherhood, someone else would be willing to offer half his farm to him to start his business. That's not possible today. So in a situation like this, what advice do you have for a person who wants to start business, and how much money it will be needed? How does he work out all that?
Okay.
Yes, brother.
I purposely did not address this question because one, this question is very specific to different countries, as you said, depending on the business model, depending on the banking models over there. But also because I don't think that is the make or break factor for any new venture. We like to think like that because that is an acceptable excuse to the world. Everybody can be told, well, I didn't have the financial backing, so I didn't start a business. But believe me, this is not an excuse. Tell me one person who has actually started his big business who was actually rich. None of them, right? They started from absolute poverty, and that's how they actually made their movement up. Yes, they accessed funds, but how did they access the funds? They accessed funds by showing performance, by showing results, by moving up. And that's how I suggest we do. Also, let me mention that most of the industries or the earlier businessmen I'm talking about were people who needed a huge amount of money. Today, in a very virtual world, the norms for requirement of funds have come down a lot, a lot. As I said earlier, advertisements would cost you, millions. But today, to advertise on social media requires very small money. So the ways that you should actually be doing, I'm not saying you don't need any money, but yes, I'm just saying don't use that as a mental excuse to stay away from this and say, I don't have money, so I can't do it. Well, do need money, and it's a good idea to have somebody else also with you in your business as an investor. You know why? Not because you need the money. Even if you don't need the money, get somebody to invest in your business, because that builds an accountability. Because if it's your money and you're making a loss, you're not answerable to anyone else. But the moment it's somebody else's money, you feel a little ashamed, and you will make a double effort to try and make it to get a profit on it rather than make it go down. So do have somebody invest. Now, who do you get this money? Who do you get people to invest? Now, usually business books tell you the three F's: friends, families, and fools. Now, who are those fools? Those fools are people who can be sold your business idea and who will trust in you enough to be able to invest in you. Now, you've got to make those pitches. A lot of us actually say, well, if I got finance sitting at home, I'd start the business tomorrow. But I won't go out and pitch. After all, I'm not begging them for anything. Well, you know what? The first thing that you have to do when you start your venture is put our own self, our ego, at the corner. Just have to put it outside. You're going to go there and going to pitch it to people, and you're going to pitch it to people, and you're going to pitch it to people. An example of this is Colonel Sanders, KFC, right? He started it at the ripe old age of 65 after his retirement. And he had this wonderful chicken formula which he wanted to sell. And everybody was ready to buy it. But the problem was he wasn't ready to sell it as a recipe. He wanted a share of every piece that was sold as a franchise. And nobody was ready for that. He went, he was rejected. He went, he was rejected. 1009 rejections later, somebody said a reluctant yes. And today KFC is what it is. So the point is, make your efforts, go out and talk to people, because you'll also know how good your idea is when you pitch it in front of people. And don't think people don't have money. Just as today we are looking at a loss of jobs, there are also people who are taking in people in jobs, right? So just as you need money, there are people sitting in the Muslim world who would like to invest. You need to connect with them. Yes, there is a lack of ecosystem. That is true. We need to work. People who are hearing this right now and who are part of can make this ecosystem happen, definitely have a role in building a platform where both of them can connect together. But even until then, I suggest start with your friends, family, and make pitches to anybody, because if nothing else, you'll get free advice. Everyone's good at that. And that will help to make your plan even more watertight and yourself a better success.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the last point that you said about making pitches, that is so crucial. Unless and until you believe in what you're planning to do, and you're willing to share it with others and get them on board, you will never be able to make a start. So making the pitches is extremely important. Here's another question which has to do with, and I think you just touched upon it when you said get an investor on board. So I have two questions, and I'm going to combine both the question. One of the questioner wants to know, what advice will you give in order to choose a right business partner? And you are a co-founder also in an organization. And the second question is, do I need a co-founder for a business, to start a business? So you said get an investor to start a business. Is the investor the same as a co-founder or a partner, or are they separate? What is your advice? And what are the prerequisites to have a right business partner?
Okay. Uh, None of us has got all the skills that are needed to start a business. Let's accept that. And there's a fantastic formula which says hire or partner your weaknesses. Hire or partner your weaknesses. What does it mean? Whatever it is that you don't have, hire them or get them in as partners. Now that requires a very, I would say, objective self-evaluation to be able to understand what are my strengths, what are not my strengths, and how do I get the right people to be able to be with me in that. Now, frankly speaking, a co-founder or an employee doesn't really make a difference. In fact, one of the great ways of actually hiring a person is ask yourself, would I have taken this person as a co-founder? I always tell this when hiring in any big company, the question you should ask is, would I have taken this person in a senior position? Would I have taken this person as a co-founder? And if your answer is yes, then that person is right for you, even as an employee. Otherwise, no. So I would say whenever you're looking at human resource, when you're looking at part of your team, you need to have the people whom you will be complementing, not duplicating. And the understanding levels have to be very, very high. Now, how do you develop that? Obviously, friends is not the only way or the right way to do it. Business ventures have to have a formal relationship, even if it's within friends. We need to understand that each one of us is contributing and bringing our own understanding, our own value to this whole thing. And to be able to do that, it's important to be able to have those complementing skills. Now, how should we have an investor and why should we have an investor? As I said, the investor, a hands-off investor, a person who merely invests, is one option. The other is to have a co-founder where you have each one of them actually investing and being part of the business. Now, that again depends on the kind of skill sets you need. Let's say, a very professional service organization where you need people to come up with specific skills will need co-founders who've got those skills, not necessarily the money. For example, a consulting firm or maybe an educational institution, which I'm right now working on, does not really need people with funds to come in as co-founders because the fund requirement is not that high. What we need is the right kind of people to have that skills to take this education and teaching model forward. So we are having co-founders of people with that right mindset, with technology, with education, with the kind of academic background that we need. And the funding is coming in from an investor who's purely an investor. So I think using these as criteria, I think you should really look at it. But having an outside funder is always better because all of you together have an accountability to him or her or that organization. So that would be my advice on this.
Okay. All right. Barakallah Feek. That's a very important point. In fact, there's something which you mentioned about skills, that it's not about having all the skills. And that was another question which had come in. So I will still put in this question here. How do I know whether I have all the skills required to start a particular business? So it's not important to have all the skills, but in fact, I'll just correct myself. How do I know I have the necessary skills to start a particular business and also to manage the day-to-day operations?
Okay, so what are the necessary skills to manage a business? If you ask me, I think it was Henry Ford who said this. He said, I make sure I'm the dumbest person in the room when I'm with my employees, which in other words means I hire people better than me. He also said this, I believe, which he said that I have no great skill, only one skill, to get people better than me to work for me. If you have this one skill, that's good enough to be a businessman. What else do you need? I know a lot of people who are actually very, shall we say, less, let's say, educated, very technologically challenged, but who are great at managing people, who are great at managing conflicts among team members, who are great at giving a perspective and a paradigm to people and to organizations. And these people actually have been the founders and entrepreneurs who have created huge businesses. So I don't think that a lot of skills you need to have, except this one skill of being, as I said, the personality skill of attracting the right people, retaining them. And also let me mention, there are, one is the kind of work you talked about, entrepreneurial skills that are needed. But a lot of entrepreneurial work is actually very, 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 very routine. It sounds very glamorous to set up a new company. I'm a director on the board, and we are making a pitch and we are giving an investor presentation. But that's 5% of your time. 95% of the time, it's those same cold calls, it's those same brochures, it's those same mailings, it's those same packing, it's those same complaints. Life is like that. Let's accept it. Entrepreneurship, or what we see as entrepreneurship on the media, as people who are successful, right? You have so many people who are projected to be absolutely fantastic, happy, glamorous. Well, that's only 5% of their time. The rest, 95%, is back-breaking work and boring work. What kind of skill do you need for that? If you just have persistence, that's enough. So if you're persistent enough to be able to continue with it, even despite problems, if you are, let's say, amicable enough to get right people to come in and work for you, And if you're enterprising enough to allow them to do what they want without letting your ego come in the middle, that's all you need to be an entrepreneur.
All right. Thank you so much. That was really insightful. The motivation that you give, mashallah, may Allah bless you for that. There's a question. Do you or your organization offer any startup workshop where you cover step-by-step approach through which a person who attends will be able to start his or her business? Is there something which you have in plan to start?
We are
And how can
designing.
people get in touch with you? Yeah.
Sure, sure. Well, we are designing it. As I mentioned, our organization, ALEFS, which is the Academy of Life and Futuristic Sciences, was in fact developed during the COVID, because we saw this entire COVID as a great opportunity for the leapfrogging of technology-based learning. If somebody was to say 6 months ago or maybe a year ago that your children will be studying at home using a technology enabled computer, all of us would have laughed and said, well, education can't happen like that. But the fact is, last 6 months, all of us have been going through that. And that's not only for our children, but also for all of us. And so we have seen a lot of changes that have happened. Most of the colleges, schools, and others being down, a lot of education has transformed on the web. So what we thought is, well, let's not replicate or duplicate what they're doing, but let's fill in the gaps that are there. We're talking about life skills. We're talking about the skills I've just talked about. How can I actually be a good team player? Who teaches that? Well, not really teach that, but train that. Who does that? Not really many people. So we thought, why don't we create something around that? Entrepreneurship. Well, we have courses like BBA, which give you the skills and techniques. But what do we actually need in terms of the inner qualities of me to be able to be a good entrepreneur? So we are in fact on the process of developing that course. Right now, we've got one course out, which is for learning processes. It's called Marks and Intellect. The second course is going to be on entrepreneurship, and hopefully we'll have that in due course. My email ID is, of course, shared on the presentation. So that could be one way of connecting, please.
Okay. There's a question, and this has to do with, there are two questions, but I'll come to the second one later. We'll keep it towards the end. When and how will I know that my business idea with which I had initiated my plans, etc., is going in the wrong direction and I need to stop? How long do I persist? In fact, a correlated question is, and I'm going to put up this question now, how do I know, or when should I plan an exit from the business? So there are two parts here. The first part, of course, is when do I know when my business idea is going wrong and I need to pull the plugs? And the second one is exit strategy in both the cases. One, when the business is not doing well, and second, if the business is really doing well, but I don't see further growth. So when should I pull the plugs? Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. So, okay. An average startup, once it gets on the market and gets, let's say, a good price, average is a little higher. I would say a lower side of it is 10 years. It takes 10 years for a startup to get onto a market and then get an investor or get sold at a good price. So what we look up at, a startup with a founder got sold at this high price is actually 10 years of hard work. Let's get that in mind first. Because when we have the image startup, we somehow think he started it yesterday and he sold it today. Even if you look at a WhatsApp, if you look at even India and Flipkart, all these companies have spent a huge amount of time building their base. Nobody is here to buy your name. They are buying your systems. They are buying your processes. Understand this once more. The more you make the company dependent on you, make your venture dependent on you, the lower is going to be your price. We call that person a centerpreneur, not an entrepreneur. He makes the entire organization centered on him. A lot of people do business, who set up their shops. Every day morning, they go through their shop. The persons are waiting outside the shop. They take out the key and give him. So the person opens the door and then he goes in and cleans and the person sits on the cash. The whole day is telling, attend to this person, attend to that person. He's taking money from him, putting it in his cash, giving it out. Do you think he's an entrepreneur? He's actually employed in his own company. You know the definition of an entrepreneur? A person who, even when he's not there, the organization works as well. Our usual test of an entrepreneur is, if you're a true entrepreneur, I give you 2 weeks paid holiday when the circumstances are very difficult. But if I could give you a paid holiday overseas without any access to laptop, mobile, or any other means of communication with your organization, and your organization did as well, if not better than when you were around, then you've got your organization set. So the real challenge, and this is what people pay for, they don't pay you for your name, for your company, for your product. They actually pay you for your systems. They pay you for your connects. They pay you for your database. Those are the kind of things that they pay you. They don't pay you for an idea. Okay, let me also bring another myth to the front, right? A lot of people think, if only I had that one great, bright idea, I'll start my company and I'll become a hit overnight. There is no great idea, believe me. There is no great idea. It's simple ideas, ordinary ideas, which are persistent, which make a great company. And that persistence is about the ability to implement, the execute, scale up, systemize, and then sell. So I would say, as far as selling is concerned, make sure you've got it at that stage where even without you, the organization can run. Then only you will be on the market. And the average, I would say the lower edge of that is about 10 years. So that's the kind of time you should do. Now, how should you know if the company is going in the wrong way and you should exit right now? This is something we need to evaluate regularly. And one of the worst times, or one of the problems we do, is when the company is doing really well, then we don't do it. We think, oh, when the company is making a loss, then I should worry about whether I'm doing the right things. No, when the company is doing very well, that's the time you should actually be wondering. A lot of companies are closed down. Huh? Kodak is one of them. Not closed down, but actually reduced their sales and lost a lot of business. Why was that? Because they didn't see the imminent threat from mobile phones that came in. They didn't see the change to digital technology when it was happening. Nokia didn't see it because it was doing too well. So I would say, whether things are changing, whether you should be doing something else, should be a regular review. Regular review. This is a part of a regular strategy review, which should be done maybe every 6 months in an organization. And when you find that you've moved to the wrong direction, all you need to do is to revert, change. It does not mean I've got to jump out of the boat. You're in the sea, the boat is yours, re-steer it. It's not a rock. You can re-steer it. Your organization can be reshaped. General Electric, one of the companies I quoted, is one such example. In the end of 1800s formed and still relevant today. Why? Because it has reinvented itself at every stage. Reinvented itself at every stage. So don't think of the organization as a static thing, which either has to succeed or has to go kaboom. Rather think of it as a living being, which is being guided by you, steered by you in the direction of the market.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We will be trying to wrap up. We'll take another couple of questions. In fact, there's a question which I think you just touched upon it. So in case you would want to add something more to it, how do we keep a company fresh and not let it die like many companies have? You just mentioned about reinventing. It would be nice if you could just explain, how do we keep reinventing in this time?
I talked about a strategy refresh. A strategy refresh is not only a management jargon, but it's about looking at the organization within. It's looking at the environment outside. It's looking at the competitors. If you look at these three things regularly, you'll be able to get a perspective on what's going right and what needs to be put right. What are things that are happening in my environment that will change the company, that will change the products that I'm doing, and how can I adapt to that? What's my competitor doing that I should be aware of and perhaps even learn from? And what's happening inside the company that I need to change? If you can work on all these three sides regularly, maybe every 6 months, you will be always re-energizing your company and coming up with newer ways. I'll tell you what the problem happens. When you move from an entrepreneur to become a businessman, that's when problem happens. Until you are an entrepreneur, the why is very, very sure. Why am I doing this business? Let me give you the example of Bill Gates. Whenever Bill Gates would achieve a target or Microsoft would achieve a target, everybody in the company would get a plaque which would say, thank you for being a part of our effort to make this world a better place. Not to achieve so many sales. The why was so important and it was kept. But when you reach a certain level where your business is on auto mode and you're growing and you're doing things right, then somehow the focus shifts from the why to the how. How do I keep making more money? And that's the time we actually lose that energy. So remain an entrepreneur right through, which means always have that large perspective, always think afresh, always think of new opportunities that are coming. If you can remain that, your organization will remain fresh. If you become a typical businessman who's only interested, how can I increase churn and how can I enhance profit, your organization will not be able to grow.
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and I think you will be the right person to answer this. Have you both agreed to wear blue today, or it's just a coincidence?
I was
so
just wondering, yeah, when I
so
looked at it. Yeah.
yeah, so both of us were feeling blue, and both of us are from the same city, coincidentally.
That's right. Right.
So there are a lot of coincidences today, mashallah. We'll just quickly take a couple of questions. There's one on the issue of networking. And nowadays, we have a lot of people who get into networking with the purpose of promoting their businesses. However, we know the hadith of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, mentioned about that believer who, whenever he comes in company of another believer, meets him for the sake of Allah. And then we have today the concept of networking, where when we meet another person, we don't meet him for the sake of Allah, but we meet him for the sake of business. So, how do we do halal networking? And isn't that the business option also? Please.
Yeah. So, see, even when I take a training program on networking, even to a non-Muslim audience, I tell them the purpose of networking is not to enhance your business. The purpose of networking is to help that person solve the problem through you or your contacts. Let's take this as a philosophy. Whenever we meet somebody, our networking does not mean distributing visiting cards. That's what all of us take. Oh, I went to a networking conference. What did I do? 200 cards gone. You know where they're gone? Tomorrow in the respective dustbins. They don't serve any benefit, any purpose at all. We think we are doing networking, we are not. What we are actually supposed to be doing is try to understand whenever you meet a person, how can I help this person? Whether through my product or through somebody else whom I know who can help make this need or close this need. And that is exactly the purpose that we are looking at. When Allah Ta'ala's Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that meet them for the sake of Allah, try and help them in whatever way you can, then that's what you're doing. And if incidentally you have a product which serves that need, you are allowed to promote it, mention it, that's it. But the intention is to help them. If you have that intention, that not only as a Muslim, but even as a normal businessman, networking will really be successful rather than appearing to be a very peripheral and a very just a formality that people are doing. In fact, those networkings don't work. I've had so many visiting cards I get at conferences which go into the dustbin the day after. So make that one connection, which will give you a fantastic result rather than 100 visiting cards distributed, out of which nothing will result over there. So be selective. There's a couple of books on these things you can read. One is called Never Eat Alone, right? The whole philosophy of networking is given in that. And it says your real point should be actually to try and help a person, not to sell your own business, not to sell your own product. So if you have this philosophy, which is actually the right philosophy for networking as a Muslim or otherwise, and if you use that, then I think it will be within the limits.
Okay. Never Eat Alone is the name of the book. If any of you have not made a note of it yet, Never Eat Alone, you can check it out. A couple of questions, or in fact, we're just almost done with this. We have a person who wants to know, when you talk about the different organizations in your presentation, you were giving out the names of all prominent entrepreneurs who started from the scratch, and they came from a very impoverished background, and yet they created a name for themselves. Most of the names which you gave over there, or in fact, all of the names that you gave over there, were people from different other communities. We don't have many from our own community in that list. Is there any specific reason that we have not been able to make it to that list so far? And secondly, um, how fair would it be, or what is the exact learning that we should take from their life? Because we know that there are a lot of limitations in their belief as well. So, what should ideally be our lessons that we should take when we study about their life?
Yeah. So first, let me take the first question, which is why are not as many Muslims seen in that list? Well, I think I touched upon it. I think there is a general perception that wealth and pursuing wealth is not a good thing. So, therefore, we should actually abhor it, or we should actually just use it for our limited purposes and not really go behind it. While I agree with it, as far as I said, it's not for me. If I don't have the wealth in my heart, I mean, that's a dua somebody said, that pray to Allah to give me a lot of wealth. Pray to Him also not to give me the love of wealth in my heart. If I can actually have that, shall I say, detachment, it's difficult, but if I can have that detachment, then pursuing it is not bad. But somehow I think all of us have been thinking that no, we should not go with it, because then we will be kind of diverted from our real purpose on earth. But I would say it requires a level of understanding, a level of preparation mentally and from the Iman state. If we can do that, then we can and we should pursue it. There's also another reason for it why we should pursue it these days. I think those are the reasons why we haven't really pursued it all these years. But I think that today, you see, at one time it was let's say a power based world, right, where people who had the biggest, highest power, they would win. Then it became a sort of let's say an education based world. Whoever had the highest education, the scientific changes, and that country dominated. And today it's technology and other things. But essentially, what is happening today is it is all being translated into economy. And we know today that even small countries are doing tremendously well just because they're able to have the economic control. I keep saying this, that if in the earlier times, in the Prophet Wasallam's time, there were certain qualities and skills that the people needed to have. For example, the ability to fight in a battle, right? You needed to know how to use a sword, you need to know how to use a shield, you need to know how to ride a horse. Today also, you need to learn certain skills that will allow you to survive and thrive in the battlefield of the world today, to be able to project that dominance. And those skills have changed, those tools have changed. And so, the way to do it today is to again be contemporary, be excellent. We all know the story of Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was fighting, but for Allah. And when somebody spat on his face, he left him alone, saying that, now my nafs comes in the middle, I'm not going to kill you. Let us use the economic tools like that. Let us use it for the sake, to be able to use it for the welfare of the people. And if our own nafs comes in the middle, then we shall be detached from it. We have to develop that level of quality within us. So I think that is the first reason why we've not done it, and how we should do it and why we should do it. The second question is, how much can we learn from them? Well, there is an old, I think, Persian saying which says, look at the flower, not the hand which gives it. Look at the flower, not the hand which gives it. So anything good that you can take, let us take it. Our apprehension of taking anything from somebody who does not share the same beliefs prohibits us from taking also things which may be useful to us. So therefore, whatever is good from that which we can take, which is permissible to us, let us take that. Because after all, the Prophet ﷺ also said that hikmah is the lost wealth of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he should take it. So take whatever learning you are getting from anywhere, as long as it is within your beliefs and your limits.
Barakallahu feek for that. Mashallah, there are a lot of other questions which have come in, but we have limitations of time. And also, I would like to mention that the speaker and myself, we both are from a part of world where it's almost close to midnight now. So we will need to wrap up the session for today. However, I have shared the Facebook link of the speaker. You can find him on Facebook as A. Rahim Kal. ARAHIMCAL. So you just do facebook.com/ARAHIMCAL. And the email address was shared during the presentation. So if you just rewind the video, you just go back a few sessions, you'll be able to get the details. Barakallahu feek, Brother Abdul Rahim. Before I conclude the session, I would like you to make your concluding remarks, and then I will take over to conclude the session, inshallah.
Thank you so much for all the questions. They were really insightful. I think all of you have that inner thirst to be able to go forward. And I just want all of us to understand that entrepreneurship is as much a game of the mind as it is about the finances, the product, the business plan, the investments. I think if all of us were to just understand that the need for us to play this game in this world today is a requirement to be able to re-establish ourselves as a respected, respectable community, we would play our roles in it. And another thing, let me tell you, I mean, we know a lot of Muslims in most countries, in many of the subcontinent countries at least, are very poor. And that's sometimes shown as a reason why we can't really do well in business. Well, let me tell you, by the slide I showed you, that's our biggest advantage. Biggest advantage. The people who are actually poor are the most enterprising, most entrepreneurial. For them, survival itself is enterprise. I think we need to create, those of us who are in a position can try to do that, help connect people who can fund them, give skills to these people, and see how they can come together with the right values and the right, dard, that as we say, the right pain for the entire community in their hearts, so that they can actually evolve as entrepreneurs, responsible individuals, responsible citizens, and responsible members of the Ummah. I wish all of you a good entrepreneurial journey, and I encourage all of you to take that first step, even if it's a small first step, and inshallah hope that Allah Ta'ala gives all of us barakah in this direction.
Barakallahu feek. Lot of wise, words which have come from Brother Abdul Rahim. I have made a note of them, and I can see many of the others have been sharing it in the chat box as well. Survival itself is enterprising. Look at the flower and not the hands which give you, and be an entrepreneur, not a centerpreneur. That's something new which I learned today from you, Brother Abdul Rahim, mashallah. And I have been attending your workshops and webinars in the city of Kolkata. And mashallah, now the fact that we have a very large audience in the virtual space as well, we hope that you will come up with more workshops and webinar. And on behalf of the International Open University, we would like to thank you for taking your time out. And we hope in the future we can work on similar projects where we can reach out to a larger audience, which can be beneficial for the community, beneficial for the ummah. Self-belief is a very important thing that we need to have. And that is what a believer has. A believer is supposed to have a self-belief. We have been blessed with intellect, and our intellect is benefited when we open the pages of the Quran and read it every day, because Allah has revealed the Quran to us to make us more wise. So it's extremely important that we keep ourselves attached to the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We hold on to the teachings of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. We go back and reflect into the ways and practices of the early generation of the Muslims in every aspects of our life, because the way they dealt with themselves, their lives, etc., it's an example for all of us. So let us go back and look into all of this. We have one more session coming up next week, which will be the concluding session of the BBA webinar series, which we've been running for the last 6 weeks. And it's a very important topic again, and something which is correlated to what we did today. Today we spoke on how to start a business venture. Next week, we talk about the importance of business ethics in Islam. And we have Mufti Asad Gul, who will be joining us. He is also a faculty member at the International Open University. He will be joining us to discuss his views and give us some important tips which we need to keep in mind as far as business ethics is concerned. I remind all of you that we are currently in the admission process. So if any one of you have not yet visited our website, the International Open University's website, please take out time, visit our website, register for our courses. We have courses in business administration, Islamic studies, education, psychology, Islamic banking and economics, host of other programs. So I look forward to each one of you participating and joining us for our courses. And we have a lot of webinars which will keep coming up in the coming months. Stay tuned. Remember to subscribe to this channel. Join us on our Facebook page as well. And one more reminder, Brother Abdul Rahim can be reached, his Facebook page. The details will be shared in the chat section as well a little later. You can connect with Brother Abdul Rahim as well. Barakallahu feekum. We would once again thank Brother Abdul Rahim on behalf of the IOU for taking time out and attending. All of you, Jazakumullahu khairan for taking your time out and attending the session. With that, we will conclude with the dua. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.